Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Oh, good. Welcome everybody, and I hope you're going to enjoy the presentation I'm going to do to you today to give you some idea about how long a business continuity plan can take. I hope you can all see my screen. So what we're going to go through today, first of all, let's give a quick agenda here. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to give some reasons why, how long a BCP will take, and the drivers why people create BCPs in the first place. Also, the key components of what is in a BCP, and I'll be referring to BCP several times, and that stands for Business Continuity Plan. It's a pretty standard term out there. We'll then summarize it, and if there's time at the end, there'll be a Q&A where you'll be able to ask some questions. So, firstly, just to introduce myself, my name is Mr.Trup, NBCI, that means I'm a member of the Business Continuity Institute. My early career started in IT. I did 6 years technical things, doing various IT roles as a server engineer, business analyst, IT manager. I was a Microsoft certified engineer, and I'm ITIL qualified. So I come from a strong IT background. Following that, after those 6 years doing IT, I've been doing the last 16 odd years running DRBC related projects and programs globally for some major organizations. And I provided consultancy, all sorts of industries. You can see some of the names there. Most of them are, well, they're all sort of well-known names, especially in the UK, but some of them are global, Benz, BP, Rio Tinto, etc. And providing them with the consultancy which they paid me to help them with, basically. Now, I'm now the managing director and have been for the last few years. I'm the founder of ADT Business Continuity. We are independent BC consultants and have a number of my team who are also members of the Business Continuity Institute and have experience in all these kind of fields of disaster recovery and business continuity. So the reasons affecting how long a BCP will take. So there's a picture there of a ball of string, because it really can be a ball of string, but you can start to identify some key areas of how long it will take for you, because most people are interested in how long it takes for their organization. So it will depend on various factors. Some of them are obvious, some of them are less so. So the drivers and the reason it's being done is a key item. I'm going to come on to that in a bit more detail later on. So we'll talk about that later. Also, we're going to talk about later as well is IT dependency and how dependent your IT, how dependent your organization is on its IT, and what's its actual resilient capability, i.e. what you can actually do with what the technology you've got at the moment. Resources allocated, so some organizations will just give someone a part-time role and just say, can you just sort this out for me, please? Sometimes they will set up a whole team of people. Obviously, the more resources you throw at it, the more you can do. However, there are limits to resources. So the example I like to give is a project manager example is, you know, if you had 9 women, you can't make a baby in 1 month. So over a certain level of resources with this kind of project, you just can't make it go any quicker because it will take time to go through the process. The skills and experience of the person given responsibility. So again, if that person has experienced done it many times before, then obviously the thing comes a bit more easy to them. However, if you give it to someone who's a sort of a junior person who's never done it before, is going to struggle to actually get over the line and be able to do things in a correct way. Seniority of sponsor, again, very important because you need buy-in from the top. If you don't get buy-in from the top, there'll be certain decisions and certain risks, etc., that will just not, decisions will just not be taken, and you just won't be able to make progress. So that ideally, you need to sponsor it from the very, very top. Without that, it can be very, very difficult to get things through. Size of the organization, obviously, the larger the organization, it can take longer, but that can also depend on the complexity. So a large organization that's not very complex can be a completely different story to one that is very, very small but very complex. Again, number of locations, so where it's spread out globally, internationally, nationally, etc., or just one office, that can have an effect on kind of plan and how long you're going to spend doing it. Business type, so there are obviously lots of different business types, and organizations like a company, consultancy companies that's office-based, that's all using technology, everyone's on laptops, it's relatively easy to write a business continuity plan because they already operate in a mode, probably, where they're all remote, or many of them are remote, and it doesn't really make a lot of difference where they're physically sitting. However, if you take a catering company where you've got kitchens and physical items there, you can't just move them lock, stock and barrel to another location. So the type of organisation has a massive effect on the sort of length of the business continuity plan will take. There's a certain level of discovery in all these projects, because as soon as you start asking questions about what the capability is and what they've got, you start to open what in England we call cans of worms, where you open it and more problems come out. You find out some things that you didn't know beforehand, and suddenly your scope has changed because you found all these things that really you had no idea, and you've got to now incorporate them into your plan. There will also be a whole lot of false assumptions, which I'll come on to later, but basically people think things will be okay, and during the project you find actually those assumptions are not actually correct. You can use tools. There's various types of business continuity management software that you can use. Generally speaking, they only really work in large organizations because they tend to be quite expensive pieces of software, but they can reduce the time if it's a large organization and it's worth the investment in the software. Just from an administration point of view, it can help a lot. So, as I said before, the drivers why BCP are created. It's important to understand why people do BCPs, because there are a whole load of reasons behind it, and I'm going to go through them now. So the two main aspects. Well, the first one is a third-party request. So you get a client or potential client who's requested one. So they have said to you, where is your business continuity plan? You have tender requirements, so you're tendering for business, especially when you tender from small organizations to large organizations. As part of their checklist of items that they will be asking for, one of them will be often a business continuity plan, and it's becoming more and more common, especially if you're tending to government-type organizations. They just say, where's your business continuity plan? And without it, your tender will fail, even if everything else is perfect. Laws and regulations, so different countries and different places have different laws about what you need to do, so that will be an external driver. And also regulations, so different industries will have different regulations. So for example, the banking industry will have much stricter regulations than, say, the catering industry, because it's a national infrastructure thing that is important for them to maintain a good business continuity. Another one, we get a lot of these where an audit comes in and they highlight a major requirement. They'll say your business continuity is not up to standard, you need a business continuity plan. So these are the key areas where you get a third-party request. The other aspect you will get is an internal driver, so something that's causing it to drive internally. So that is an incident, so something happens, and a major incident happens, and suddenly people say, we just about got away with that one, that was great, but how are we going to manage next time if we don't have the same person in place at the same time? If that person's on holiday, how are we going to cope? So suddenly an awareness is raised, or something externally happens nearby, a nearby office happens, goes up on fire or something, and you go, okay, we need to be aware because it could happen to us. And the other one is an individual comes in, usually a new person comes in, sees it's not in a state that he or she feels comfortable with, and they want to improve the maturity of the business continuity maturity. You also get drivers of standards, so an organisation needs to implement standards. This sort of could come from a third-party request, or it could come from a commercial need where the organisation has decided to go for a certain standard. It won't necessarily be a business continuity standard. It could be another standard that incorporates and has a part of it that says you need a business continuity plan. So those are generally internal drivers. The typical responses you get to these different requests are, for the third-party one, you'll get a response that we have no choice. Do the minimum to satisfy requirements, just get us through, basically. JFDI, if you don't know what that is, you can look it up, but it's JF, just effing do it, basically. And it becomes a tick box exercise. They just want to get through it, and there's no real feeling that they want to embed this or make it forward. They just have to make this horrible thing, as far as they're concerned, go away. when you come with up with an internal driver, it is difficult to get buy-in and sponsorship because it won't be seen necessarily as a commercial advantage, and it's just a cost. So why do we need to do it? It may start as a program of good intentions, but then other priorities within the business take over, and suddenly this thing gets put to the back of the shelf or the back of the room, and the elephant in the room, and no one mentions it anymore. Also, you'll get the, we're fine, it won't happen to us, head in the sand, and we'll be fine. So those are the typical responses you get, and it's important to understand why you're creating an BCP in the first place, so you can at least address those different responses. So if we move on to the next one, what are the impacts on the BC program and plan of the different drivers? So in this table here, what you can see is at the top you've got the third-party requests and the internal driver. So I'm going to go through these now. So first one, management buy-in and support. If you have management buy-in and support, it's pretty easy. That part of it you've already got because they've just got to do it. However, if you're trying to do it internally and you're driving internally and not the top bod in the organisation, you will find it quite difficult. You'll get a lot of resistance. Funding and resources are easy when you have a third-party request because they've just got to do it. It may be painful and they may not want to do it, but it's relatively easy. However, again, getting funding and resources is going to be difficult because you've got to persuade people to spend money that they don't necessarily see a benefit of. The likelihood of it sustaining in, so what happens in a lot of organisations we go into is they need to do it quick, they need to do it fast. They'll do it, they'll get it through, but once it's done, it'll be like, oh, that's over, great, let's move on to the next thing. And what will happen is over the next 2 or 3 years, nothing much will happen, it won't develop any further, and it'll be out of date. And then another audit or another external driver will come along and they start doing it all over again. So you've lost all the momentum. Whereas if you've got an internal driver, you've got a bit more support internally, you've got a bit more momentum, and people will start to become bought into it and become part of their DNA and they'll want to do it. So therefore, you're more likely to, so when it comes to improved maturity, it's less likely to fail, less likely to be more mature in 3 or 4 years' time. It'll be back where it was, or further back, worse, because it'll be out of date. Whereas internally, you've got more chance. Testing the plan is likelihood. So if you get a request for a tender, for example, it's very unusual for the tender requester to say, we want you to do a plan. Sorry, they'll say, we want you to do a plan, but they won't necessarily request you to test it. So it'll only be done normally if an audit requests it. So it won't be done in most cases. Whereas in a internal drive, again, you've got the momentum behind it. You can persuade people that it needs to be done. Assurance level. So this is the assurance level. Another way of describing assurance level is a warm and fluffy feeling about how comfortable you feel with the processes you've got in place. And because you're driving just to get it through the audit or just to get it through the tender, you won't really be driving towards assurance. So therefore, it'll just be a paperwork exercise, and therefore your assurance will be quite low. Whereas again, with an internal driver, it's quite high. What you can see is the first part of it on the left is the green. It's green as it starts off, but later on it doesn't sustain itself, so the internal sort of wins over as long as you can get it through. Okay. So moving on to the next one. So these are some of the mistakes I've seen that will add and waste time in terms of building and creating a BCP. So it's quite common to leave the responsibility to IT. The business continuity did evolve out of disaster recovery, IT disaster recovery, and but however, the name of business continuity is pretty clear. It says business, but a lot of companies will leave it to the IT people to do it. However, IT disaster recovery is just one element of it. So you need to consider other items such as reputation damage, loss of access to premises, health and safety. And none of these, in my experience, are ever really the responsibility of IT. So don't just assume it's IT. IT plays a massive part in it, don't get me wrong, and I'll come on to that later, but it's not the only thing. It's things that IT has no responsibility for normally, or shouldn't have. The next thing is aiming for perfection. It's not a good idea to try and be perfect because it will never be perfect. Okay, it can change different scenarios, and you have to be adaptable and very pragmatic. That's the word I use a lot. You have to be pragmatic about it. That's key. So don't aim for perfection. Writing a bloated plan. So people will go, right, if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, you end up with a document that looks like an encyclopedia, if anyone remembers what an encyclopedia was, that thuds on the desk. And then when it comes to implementing and carrying out a plan, people just look at it and go, I'm not going to read that now. I've got 10 minutes to make a decision, and therefore that document is too big, and therefore it covers it's just too big. You need to make sure that it's flexible and it will cover multiple different scenarios. Making assumptions. Every time I hear this word, it's like a red flag to me, because I sit in meetings and say, well, we can ship from here, we can do it from here, we can. It's easy, we just move to our other office. Or actually, when you start to investigate it, those are ideas. They may work in the head of the person who's making the assumption, but in reality, they just won't work because they never tested it, they never asked the other person, or whatever the process is. So don't make assumptions. Just don't assume. If someone says the word assume or assumption or whatever it is, just stop them there and say, hang on a minute, does that really work? Can we just verify that? And finally, on the top 5, anyway, there's loads more obviously, but this is the top 5. You write the plan, but you don't test it. So this applies in many cases where, especially when someone's been asked to do it for a tender, they don't test it. So you can't really verify the plan is going to work. It may have satisfied an auditor, it may look good on a piece of paper, but I'm a big football fan, and often you see a football team that looks great on paper, but the fact is they play on grass, so it doesn't necessarily apply that just works. So until it's tested and gone through, you can only test it as to whether it would actually work, okay, to get the assurance you need. Okay, so what are the key components of the business continuity plan? What do you need to put in there? So these are the key headings normally that you put in a BCP. So document control, and I'm going to go through some of these in more detail. The document control, scope, objective, business analysis. I'm not going to read them all through, but basically I'm going to go through some of these later. But these are the key elements you need to have in every business continuity plan. Otherwise, it's not a complete business continuity plan. And if I was looking at it from an audit perspective, I'd fail it if it missed these key things. Okay, there could be more, but these key things that have to be there. IT disaster recovery, as I mentioned, is sometimes called these days service continuity. It's basically the same thing, but it's often referred to as service continuity. That's why I put it in there, service continuity as well. So you need to have disaster recovery / service continuity plans, so a specific plan for the IT disaster recovery, and you need to have that as part of the business continuity plan. It may be a separate element, and I'll come on to that a bit later. But those are the key IT aspects. There are a few other things that you may have with yourself that you have, but they're already existing in other places. So, for example, HR, staff welfare regulations. There may be a whole lot of regulations that you need to follow, and you may have already existing policies that you can use as part of the processes. And it's possible that some of these things you have to write from scratch. You're a very small organization, and you can incorporate them into a section within the business continuity plan. Otherwise, all these other things you can then, if they're too big on their own, the business continuity plan would just be a reference point and say, for further details on the HR policy, look at document X. Embed the document or put a link to it or whatever. Same applies to crisis management. You can put a basic crisis management within the business continuity plan, or if you're a large organization, you may have a separate crisis management process, which is then just linked, embedded within the business continuity plan. Again, communication is the same thing. If it's a small organization, you can just put communications in there as a separate section and small details, and detailed basic comms plan, or you already have one, or you need to have one, and you have a separate one created. So those are the things that you incorporate into your business continuity plan. So some will overlap, some of them are part of it. Okay, so document control. Just before I start on that, what I've done the next few sections, I've created this little rev counter thing that indicates how long each of these sections will take in terms of relative to its time. So if it's green, it means it's quite a short, quick part of the process. If it's amber, it's a medium-ish, and if it's red, it's going to take a long time. They don't mean they're bad or good, they just mean how long it's going to take. So you'll see these at the top of the next few slides, just to give you an idea. So document control, this is where you specify the history of document. It's a standard thing within any organization, but it applies equally as a good practice to every type of document you have, but it applies equally to business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans as well. So it's important for version control, so you don't you have a problem not knowing where you are in the version in the maturity of a document. You start maybe with 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. To indicate 0 point normally indicates a draft version, and then once it's full version, it's 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, or 2, or whatever. It's just governance, and it's good practice, basically. So it ensures that when you're editing and testing and invoking, you are using the right version. Just like the software, really, it's the same kind of thing. You don't want to use an earlier version. The document is relatively easy to pick it up, and you start using the wrong one, which could be a disaster. It could increase your response to your disaster if you did use the wrong version, especially if things have changed radically. This is a kind of typical layout of a document control. It's not prescriptive, but basically these are the main things you need to put in there. Title, author, issue date, who the owner of the document is, and what version number this is, 1.0, and you can see the history there. So it started off with 0.1, and then first draft, and then 1.0. You may see multiple, maybe 1.1, it could have hundreds of different approvers, and it could go for a long process. This could be quite long, but it's very important to document it to make sure it's covered. If you just see a business continuity plan without document control, it would fail me auditing and most people auditing as well, because you don't know what age it is and who approved it, etc. So that's document control. So scope, median is time in terms of how long it will take. So you need to put in details of what be in and out of scope. So this is a sort of case study standard example. Loss of access to usability of site caused by, and not limited to, extreme weather, loss of data center, flood, fire, terrorist attacks, loss of telecoms, supply chain. All these things can vary. So they vary a lot between countries. So if you're in Japan, you have to make sure you put in the Japan or Los Angeles or whatever, you have to put in there about earthquakes. If you're in a high security issue place, you have to put something else about security. If you're in the UK, you might want to put train disruption or floods, or sorry, not floods, floods in certain areas of the country, or strikes, or whatever the risk of that particular location is. Supply chain failure may apply to some organisations, but completely irrelevant to other organisations. What's out of scope? Very important to put this out of scope, because people sometimes think that once you've created your business continuity plan, you're covered for everything. And management teams will suddenly say, oh, it's fine, whatever happens will be covered by the business continuity plan. However, business continuity plans tend to be complex and expensive to invoke, and therefore you need to have a break on it and have a limit to what they'll do. Otherwise, you'll be implementing lots of things and costing the business more money and doing it too quickly. So it's important to specify what's out of scope. So things that, the 2 or 3 people not away for an incident or something, and one branch office has a problem, you don't have to go into a major business continuity mode on invoke the plan. So it's important to have the out of scope stuff in there as well. Okay, so next thing is a business impact analysis. Just 1 second. So business impact analysis. So if you haven't heard of it, BIA is this normal acronym it's called. It's a systematic process to determine and evaluate the potential effects on interruption to critical business operations as a result of disaster activities. What does that mean? It's a way of assessing how what if a certain system, service, process, it could be a building even, went down, what would be the impact? So you go around the business and you interview individual departments, team heads, management heads, whatever it is, and you ask them how much the impact would be if something happened to them. It establishes an objective priority list, so you can work out what systems, services, or processes are very important. It could be the cooker in a catering organisation, or it could be the server in a consultancy company. You normally have a rough idea in a gut feeling of what it will be anyway, but this is important to establish what the objectives are and where it is. So it establishes the business requirements. 2 terms that you may or may not be familiar, but they're very, very common within the disaster recovery in IT, RTO and RPO. So RTO, let me explain that. RTO stands for Recovery Time Objective, which doesn't really explain it to most people who don't know what it is. So what is it? It's about the length of time that the business can manage without the system and it's causing major impact. So you go on your survey or your interview process to different parts of the business, and you ask them individually what it is their objective is, what is their recovery time objective. In my experience, it doesn't matter who you go to, whether you go to the head of finance and talk about the finance system or the payroll system or the guy running the coffee shop. You say to him, how long will it be before this has a major impact? They will normally always say 5 minutes. It doesn't matter who they are. Now, What you then have to establish is that really the case? Is it really 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Can you manage without 5 minutes? So that's where you start to drill down, and you start to explain to them that the shorter the time period that they specify, the more expensive it will be for the solution, generally speaking. So if they say 5 minutes, and it's a payroll system, you can say that's fine, but the cost to implement that 5-minute system, because we've currently got a capability of 4 hours, to go from 4 hours to 5 minutes is going to cost you £1 million. At which point they may then say, oh, actually 4 hours is probably okay, or 3 hours, or whatever. So it's an amount of time that they can manage, and it's not going to cause major long-term impact to the organisation or survival issues. RPO is recovery point objective. That is the amount of data that you could lose without causing major impact. So if you have a system whereby every day you take the tapes off site and they're removed from site every day, if you lost the system or the building where the production IT is, then you would, at the very best, have to go back 24 hours to get the tape from 24 hours ago. In some organisations, 24 hours of data is not a big deal, and therefore they wouldn't suffer. They could suffer 24 hours, 40 hours a week. It's a sort of research organisation that's got years and years of research, and 1 or 2 days doesn't really make much difference. You can have a very long RPO. It's measured in hours normally, or days, time anyway. However, if it's a bank doing transactions, thousands and millions of pounds worth of transactions every minute, then you need to have a very short RPO, which could be minutes, which would mean that your servers need to be replicated and make sure that they're online, and it's quite expensive to do that. So those are the 2 key terms. What it does, what the business impact analysis, it provides a business case for funding. So if a system is going to cost £1 million every 20 minutes that it's down, then you can actually go to the business funding people or the budget holders and say, okay, it's going to cost you £1 million for every 10 minutes. Can I have £50,000 to bring in a solution that meets the RPO and RTO? They're going to go, yes, fine. Whereas if you have it the other way around and it's going to cost £1 million and it's only going to save 50,000, there's no business case. It's like trying to insure your house. Say your house is worth 100,000. If it's going to cost you £90,000 to insure your £100,000 house, you're not going to do it. If it's going to cost £5,000, you're in a different case. So that's where the funding comes in. This is a sample of a large corporate PLC, I've just called it, and this is the payroll. So in this particular organisation, they considered less than 100k to be not very much money. Obviously, in some organisations that might be less than 1k. It depends totally on the size of the organisation. But the scale is dependent on the organisation. But ultimately, what you're trying to establish here is what would happen after 24 hours, 1 week and 1 month. How would it impact the organisation? And based on this information, you can then make a case for either massively funding IT, massively funding the recovery and the business continuity, or not funding it. So in the case of 24 hours, this particular organisation, they're talking moderate to 24 hours. You wouldn't invest necessarily. You wouldn't be able to justify the massive investment in a service that did it in 24 hours. But 1 week, where the internal reputation impact is massive, that might be a big problem for that organisation, so they make a decision. It's all about risk and how they want to do it. So it's presenting the facts, and then someone in the business can make a decision based on their risk appetite. That's a very, very brief impact, summary of business impact analysis. Invocation process. So how do you invoke? This is a relatively short time in terms of designing this. So what I'd like to use here is like a flow chart and then a description of how it would work. So I've just given you, it needs to be easy, it needs to be able to follow it in event of invocation, and straightforward. This is just a sample. So what you've got here is the incident happens, emergency services are called, first responder, evaluation, and then IMT, which I'll come on to later, is decided upon. And then the process is simple. So I'm going to pick this up in a major crisis situation, go, what are the steps that we need to take? What are the first few things we really need to look at, and how we're going to get there? And that's where it is. And one key point here, I would say, is invoke a BCP decision. As I said before, invoking a BCP should not be a light decision. It very rarely is light. It's going to be expensive, and you have to make a decision based on the benefit to it, because sometimes it's worth waiting. Sometimes waiting can cause more disaster later, but you have to take it as a consideration of what it's going to cost to invoke the BCP, especially if you have to then revert back to where we were, and it may be in the same situation, but later in time. Okay, so it's a big decision process. So if you're going to not invoke, fine, you decide and make a decision we're not going to invoke and not use the plan. So, incident management team. So this is the roles and responsibilities and what they have. So these are a core team that will be directing invocations. They are the top people that will be sitting in a room, in some respects called a war room. We can also sitting in a room trying to discussing what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. It could be a virtual room. It could be on a phone, depending on how widespread the organisation is. You need to establish who this is in this team before the incident. If you leave it too late, you'll get the world and his wife there, and you'll get too many people trying to make a decision, and it will be chaos. And all that will happen is that it will take longer to make the decision. So it's almost as important to have the people who are not going to be there, so they know they don't need to be involved and they will be directed, as it is to have the people who are there. And too many people could cause more issues and take decisions take longer. It's got to react quickly. It's got to be a very proactive group. And the objective is beforehand is to establish everyone knows their roles. So it's important to make sure that people know what they'll be doing, because one of the things it may differ from standard business as usual. So, for example, a finance director's main role may be just providing funds recovery, whereas normally his day job is to basically project long-term strategy and future financing and go to investors, etc. But this day he's just basically writing the checks. You need to make sure there's a person as the chair, and then whoever the deputy chair. It's important to establish a deputy chair, because if this person isn't available because it's a major incident and they're just not there, or on holiday or whatever, or they've been affected by the incident, then you need to know who is going to be his or her deputy, and where contact details need to be on there. It's possible these days that you may not need contact details, everybody knows who everyone is, but it's important to make sure this is established at the beginning, okay, and they know what they'll be doing in there. You can also have situations where junior people become more senior. So in this case, it's an IT director, but you may have an IT person, just an IT support person, but he suddenly becomes the most important person in the process, even though he's quite junior, because he's the one who makes the decision on whether to implement the disaster recovery site. So again, it's not necessarily as per BAU. It might be a virtual team. Incident management team. So I want to talk about disaster recovery because it's a major part of. It is a massive. So I could do a whole seminar on this and a few more as well. I've done loads more of these, but sort of briefly, for the purposes of the business continuity plan, making sure we're keeping on how long it's going to take you. It's a critical element. Most organisations are totally dependent on function, so it's like a core part. Without it, most organisations can't carry on these days. So you need to consider some key points when you're talking about disaster recovery. Never assume. I've seen so many assumptions. These tapes, we back up to this tape every day, and we're doing it for 20 years. Have you ever recovered that tape and tried to recover it in full? No. Well, do you know it works? And I've seen too many times where it just doesn't work. It's in existing people's head, but it actually works. So don't assume anything that will work. And it needs to meet the recovery requirements. So earlier I was talking about RTO and RPO, the recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives, which are set by the business. So they may say an RTO is 4 hours and RPO is 8 hours or 24 hours or whatever. But when you actually go to the business, go to the IT team, and you ask them what they can actually do, these are known as the RTC, not as often used, but recovery time capability and recovery point capability. So an example there was you go to the business and say, how long do you want? You want 4 hours. You go to IT and you go, how long will it take? And they say 48 hours. Well, that's no good. The business wants 4 hours. Okay. In order to get from 4 hours to 48 hours, as I said before, this is the cost. It's for the IT department to explain what the capability is and then see where you can meet. Either the business will go, we can't spend any more money, we'll accept the capability, at which point they match, or they'll invest the money. What tends to happen in a lot of large organisations is the two don't talk to each other at all. So the business on one side has specified 4 hours, but the capability is 48 hours, but nobody has actually verified it between them. So they're both living in a parallel universe of not actually knowing what it is. Obviously, some organisations I've worked for where they don't talk to each other, what ends up happening is that the IT don't even ask the business. They will then implement a very, very expensive, very short solution. So if a 5-minute RTO, RTC, and RPC, and they think they've done a marvellous job, the business, when you ask the business in that particular instance, they only wanted 8 hours. So although it massively exceeds it, they've just wasted a load of money on something that's way above what the business needs. So it's important to make sure these match up. And if they don't have an adult conversation and say, it doesn't match, what do you want to do now? IT teams need to give the options available. Say what we can do now, how can we fix this? Again, so testing. So unless you can test it, you don't really know it's going to work because it's just in theory. And especially with IT systems, if you don't test it, you don't know how long it's going to take. You can do it in theory, and it says it on the tin, etc., etc. But one little parameter and one little file or one little server doesn't work, and suddenly the whole thing can take days to recover, or even in some situations be completely irrecoverable. I did a test on a mainframe system a few years ago, and they were regularly backing it up. Every day it was going to back off site. All looked great. But when we tried to test it, they failed to get a single kilobyte of useful data back 3 times in a row. And it wasn't until we totally changed the backups that it actually worked. That's a mainframe, major brand, major worldwide brand, won't be here obviously, but it's worth testing it. Okay, it's very important. Don't assume it works. That word again. So documentation, so the disaster recovery plan, or sometimes service continuity plan these days is known as, is valid and up to date, the right version, and it works because it may have been written 4 years ago, and most of the processes are different, and the services different, wouldn't work at all. So does it actually still work? So you've got a sample here. So in an organisation where you have simple IT, it's all cloud-based. I don't think there's many of those that are completely like this in pure terms, but it will have a very seamless process because from an IT perspective, everything's in the cloud. You just need a desktop or a laptop anywhere in the world, and you can just sign in. So in that case, in your business continuity plan, you would just say it will all carry on working. First thing to do is just to make sure is to verify, to ask people to log in from home, let's say that's the plan, and make sure they can still access the system and carry on working from an IT perspective. So the BCP, the DR part of the BCP could be written within the document because it's one paragraph or a few lines and a few simple steps that someone needs to take to make it work because it's the same as what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. If it's complex, so it's got lots of different servers and systems, etc., you can't just put it in the BCP because it's just too much, and it would be too overwhelming for the BCP itself. So you would need to write it as a separate document. You put an overview in the BCP, and you'd either embed the DRP within the document, or you would just refer to it and say, this is the way it works, and this is the system owned by the IT team, because the IT team own the DR recovery, the IT DR recovery. So that's the 2 different scenarios, and obviously most companies will fit somewhere in between this. So you can write some of the stuff you can put as a simple, don't need to do anything different, and for X, Y, Z system, you do it. Obviously, if you've got stuff outsourced, there may be no work at all because the impact on yourselves is if your building has failed, the outsourcing companies may be based elsewhere, and therefore everything carries on as normal. But have you got a provision for what happens if that outsourcing company has got a problem? So you need to make sure that those things are covered within your BCP and in your disaster recovery plan if it needs to rise. I've seen disaster recovery plans for hundreds of pages, lots of scripts. It's getting better these days. The technology is getting better, and that things become less complex to recover. But still, there is a whole lot of intervention, and it takes a certain amount of time to do it. Okay, so that's disaster recovery, and that's the part of it that in BCP you need to make sure you consider it. But it may be a relatively small time. If they've already written a disaster recovery plan and it's all up to date, you just refer to it and just go, this is the business continuity plan, and here's the disaster recovery, and it's covered in this document. End of story. hopefully. So, alternative locations. So I'm talking from an office point of view now, not necessarily from an IT point of view. But these are locations other than the primary where people can meet and work initially. People do it in all different ways. It could be a formal arrangement or an ad hoc one, and it's dependent on the type of facility required and the number of people involved. Okay, I'm not a big fan of ad hoc arrangements, but they can work. So let's say you've got one type of company, you've got 5 people in one office, and you just say in the business continuity plan, you just say those 5, all the people in that office, we will meet at the local Starbucks 10 minutes walk away. And from there, we can arrange temporary accommodations. There are lots of companies, worldwide companies, one of them is Regis, the largest I know of, that will arrange an office within a few hours. You can just have an office and you can sit there. If you've got 5 people, they can go to someone's house. It's quite straightforward to do. But you need to have done this beforehand, because if you don't have it done beforehand and prepared beforehand, then those people will have there'll be chaos for a period of time until they get together. And at that point, you've wasted an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, before they've organised. Whereas if they knew in the beginning, they all meet at Starbucks, then they've just all gone there. And that's straightforward. Things start moving to the way, and the company's not affected as much by it. Another scenario, you've got a case, you've got 100 people in one office, and you can set up a contract. There are organisations such as Sungod and Regis, I think, where you have a contract with them, and the contract will be something like within 24 hours we provide 60 desks or 600 desks, or whatever the contract is, and they'll have facilities, they'll have IT there, they'll have phones there, and you decide that there's 40 people that can work from home. So as part of your business continuity plan, you would delegate, designate, or teams would designate who those 40 people could work from home, and who the 160 would, because to have a contract for 100 would be too expensive and not worth it. That you have a contract with 60 or core skeleton team that can work from that location, or you can do it as like a rotation basis, a shift basis, whatever it is, whatever works for you. And those companies are very, very good at being able to do this, and they've consistently tested at least once a year so that people get familiar with where they would have to go. Banks do this a lot. There's a lot of banks that have contracts like this. But small organisations don't necessarily. But otherwise, if you don't do it, then your organisation won't have any place to work. It's relatively cheap on a annual basis to get a desk. It's like a timeshare system where you are paying for a period of time for using that, but because they've subcontracted to lots of other people and they guarantee that they won't always be covered, it's a bit like spreading the risk. So they're not that expensive for people to work. It's worth looking into. You may have another situation where I've called it a logistics centre, and you look into the fact that with the only option we've got one logistics, this is again another organization we can work for, is an alternative. We need an alternative warehouse. We've got one warehouse in the UK, and that's the only one we've got. You look into it, and the costs are just too expensive. It becomes down to this insuring the £100,000 house for £70,000. And so ultimately, there's a decision made that you're not going to do it. It's not going to go for it. Okay, that's fine. But somebody needs to make sure they've documented and they've accepted that risk. They've got no alternative location. And basically, the plan is no plan, we'll just accept it because it's too expensive. And that may be a perfectly valid, it could be a perfectly valid thing. What's not valid is if they haven't considered it and haven't even looked at it and just said, oh, it's fine, we'll work from the other centre in Germany. And then you haven't asked Germany what you're going to do about it. Germany don't know anything about it. Germany won't be able to cope with it. So it's really important to make sure that whatever you come up with will actually work, because it often doesn't. Okay, so next thing is, these are some other subjects I'm not going to cover in quite as much detail because it's not a limited amount of time to do. So communications plan, I mentioned this earlier. So it contains different messages to different stakeholders. So you can have pre-written messages. So for example, if you're a company that has media interest, then how your message is going to be communicated, who's responsible for communicating messages. For example, no one outside of the comms team are allowed to speak to the media. All staff must not put anything on social media because that's not what you want. If you've got existing comms plans for, I don't know, for a marketing campaign, you can adapt them as you need to. You don't necessarily have to have individual ones, and you can link it to the document they've got. Supply chain from customers. So how are you going to ensure supply carries on? Maybe you've got alternative suppliers. If you have a warehouse that you depend on, but you have another warehouse that can also do it. Maybe it's a bit more expensive. That's why you haven't used it before, but you can do it. Obviously, it's more complex than physical businesses because you're dealing with actual goods. Activation procedure. How do you activate it? Who has the authority to activate it? And what circumstances are needed for activation? Predefined so that people don't have to think about all the processes to go through, and also people can take the decision from a lower level, but feel empowered to do so. Checklist, standard checklist. What you're going to do first. The most important thing in these most situations, human aspect, is to make sure the staff are okay. That's more important if most organisations are home than it is the actual business carries on. So those are the things you need to do from a point of view. Crisis management is a whole other subject, but you may have existing plans of how you're going to do crisis management, how you meet, who meets, who does what. Those are all important in crisis management. And then you come down to staff welfare. So how are you going to deal with the staff that deal with next of kin, casualties? There's laws up there in most countries about HR, compliance, etc., and how you're going to cope with those, how you're going to cope with those, and what you're going to do. Again, it may be existing policies just incorporate the BCP, in which case you're going to save time. If you have to write it from scratch, then it's going to take you a bit longer. Okay, so some of us to sort of come down to the end of it. So how quickly can a BCP be completed? So I've put a simple chart here, basically high and low, 1 week to 1 year. So I've done them within 3 days. If someone wants one, even less actually. If someone wants it for a tender and it needs to be presented as part of a document, and it's sent to them, and they just accept it on face value of the piece of paper, and you can do it really quickly, even in large organisations, because it's just a piece of paper. It doesn't actually prove anything, but to the person who's receiving it, it looks like you've done something. So again, that comes down to the drivers, which we talked about at the beginning. Other organisations can take a year. You've got hundreds of people. You've got multiple departments, multiple parts of the organisation that all need to be spoken to, all need to be go through. All those things that can take a year, can take even longer, because you just got to find out. So if you're doing a business impact analysis as part of it, you're going to a department, a company with 5,000 people, and you've got to go to every single department, ask them where they think they're important to the organisation. You've got to work it out. They may think they're they all think they're most important, so you have to then verify, is the HR system more important than the finance system? So all those things need to be going through, and it can take a long, long time. That's just the business impact analysis, which is just part of it. So, and then if you start to set up contracts, you need financing for this. It's going to take a long time. So it is very variable, but it can be done. And there are lots of tools and options that I've used in the past, different methods. When you get the experience, you can't sometimes bypass some of the things that you think, and you can use previous experience to sort of say, actually, we can do this a lot quicker if we're sensible about this. So, for example, you can go through a whole BIA process, or you can just say, I'll take the risk that I can guess. So I have a pretty good estimate, a gut feeling that these are the top 10 systems. Maybe they're the top 12. Maybe they're the top 15, but we're just going to scope it for those top 10, and we're going to take the risk on the others because we haven't got time to do the full analysis. We can do those kind of things. So in summary, the length of time taken to create a BCP varies from 1 week to 1 year. Depends on various factors, drivers, complexity, type of organisation, and the factors affecting sustainability. So there's lots of factors that affect sustainability. Are you going to be doing this in 3 years' time? I've worked for organisations where you do it once, and then 3 years later they come back. They don't carry it on, and therefore you've got to start the whole process again. It's an expensive thing. Whereas if you embed it in part of the DNA of the organisation, it becomes a lot easier because you're not sort of reinventing the wheel every 3 years or whatever it is. Some key elements must be in all BCPs: document control, scope, IMT members, communication process, and authentication, and a few others that I've mentioned as well. And some of them can be elements to be included in an overview because you've got existing processes. You can save time by using existing processes or existing documents you've already got. That could be crisis management, HR processes, and IT stuff. So that's the summary of where we've gone from here. So if you need more information about business continuity, I've written this guide. So if you just go to that website, and you'll get the link to this after as well anyway. And you can download a free So now it's over to Erita, who's going to talk about the training course.
Alan, thank you for this outstanding presentation. It is an honor to have you as a presenter. Before we continue with the question and answer session, I would like to inform all the attendees that PCB provides trainings and certification services for ISO 22301 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. This training is designed to provide you with the required knowledge on how to continue to operate effectively within a short period of time. A PCB certificate will demonstrate your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For more information, please visit our website www.pcb.com/training. We will now proceed with the questions. The first question was, if your communications plan calls for different messages for different stakeholders, how do you ensure consistency?
What you do is you make sure you detail which stakeholders beforehand get which messages. You classify the stakeholders in each particular way. So one could be suppliers, one could be customers, one could be internal staff, one could be contractors, and one could be the public. So you make sure you have a different message for that. You would carry out an exercise which you would test testing with it and see which messages work best and find out which one's actually appropriate to which one, and you make sure that the different messages are different.
Thank you. The next question is, could you not simplify the activation decision by comparing the estimated time to repair against RTOs?
You can simplify, but it depends on the organization's complexity. So sometimes what tends to happen is that a decision process can take quite a long time. So during a decision process, it's often the case that people, unless it's a very simple decision, or it's a no-brainer, it's a hole in the ground, in most cases the decision gets delayed because we think it'll be okay, we'll think it'll be okay, we'll think it'll be okay. So the only way you can measure it is you have to make sure that the decision time can or cannot be taken as part of the total RTC and RTC. So for example, if you say that it's going to take 4 hours to recover the IT teams will say that the decision time is not including that time. So for example, you say it can take 4 hours to recover typically from the moment you invoke, but we're not including decision time. We then make sure that the business, whoever made the decision, can understand that if they take 3 hours to decide, the total time to recover will be 3 plus 4, not 3 included in the 4, and therefore you can't do it in 1 hour.
Thank you, Alan. Before I proceed with the next question, I would highly appreciate if you could please turn up your volume since we are facing some problems of hearing you. Thank you very much.
Fine. Okay, sorry.
So the next question is, at what level do you build out business continuity plans? At the process level, at the facility level, etc.? One attendee wrote.
Again, it depends on the driver. Ideally, you build it from the bottom up so that every single person is involved in the process who needs to be, and people understand their roles in it. It very much depends on the driver. Ideally, in an ideal world, you deal it from the process level and you test it at the process level and make sure that everyone understands the process. But only by exercising it can it be embedded into the process.
Thank you, Alan, for this answer. The next question is, if making assumptions, should they be listed in the plan so that all users are aware of the assumptions made? Example, the plan assumes that the sufficient members of the IMT are available.
Absolutely. Assumptions must be listed in the plan from that point of view. So I didn't cover it in here, but yes, you need to make assumptions because if any of those assumptions are critical to the recovery process, i.e. if one of the IMT is there, then your plan becomes much more difficult to operate. So you must make sure that you have assumptions within the plan of what you expect it to be. Yes.
Thank you. Because of the time limitation, we will now go with the final questions, and all the remaining ones will be answered through email.
Okay.
So one attendee wrote, must the CEO approve the business continuity plan always, or who gives the final approval for the document?
ideally, it should be the top person. It may sometimes not called a CIO, CEO, but basically it should be the top person who's responsible, because he or she is ultimately responsible for the continuation of the organisation. So the buck stops with him or her. So yes, you can sometimes get people delegated to the task, but if the person who's at the top does not have the same, is not interested in signing it off, I would question whether their involvement and their willingness to do it. And therefore it's going to lose. Every level it goes down in terms of from the CIO downwards, it loses a certain level of gravitas and a certain level of importance. And if an organisation expands with more people at a lower level, so if the person sort of 3 levels down signs it off, the person above that, the people at level 2 and 1, will go, well, I'm not that interested. I don't need to do it because I've been told by the top boss to do it. So it should be the top person. Yes.
Once again, thank you, Alan, for this excellent presentation, and I want to thank all the attendees as well who have joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. In the upcoming days, we will send you the recording link, which will be uploaded on our official YouTube channel and on our website, pcb.com. On behalf of PCB and Alan, thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.